A new Gallup poll shows that 47% of Americans would consider voting for a socialist candidate for president. So, when we break this down by party lines, a socialist candidate would earn the consideration of 59% of Democrats, 49% of independents, and 26% of Republicans. No real surprise there. What is interesting is that socialism polled the lowest of all of the other backgrounds referenced in the poll. And this includes atheism, this includes Muslim candidates, which were second and third lowest among the American population at 58 and 60% respectively. So socialism polling essentially the lowest of all of the options given in this Gallup poll. And the poll comes less than 2 months after Bernie Sanders announced that he is running for president. And there's so much confusion here, Lewis, because many people believe that Bernie Sanders is a socialist, when the reality is that he's an advocate of the democratic socialism, right? Socialism, period, is a social and economic system which involves social ownership of the means of production and cooperative management of the economy, as well as a political theory and movement that aims to establish such a system. Bernie Sanders is not advocating for the elimination of private business and industry in lieu of to be replaced by public shared ownership of industry. If 47% of people would consider voting for a socialist, there should be no problem whatsoever with Bernie Sanders, who is advocating a more socialistic version of capitalism than that which the vulture capitalists might prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're seeing this turn into not such a dirty word anymore, which is good news. If you are going to advocate for socialist policies, you have to be prepared to be called a socialist. But I guess there's still some confusion there.
Well, and this gets us to what maybe is the real issue, because 47% saying they would consider voting for a socialist means that there's 53% who would not consider voting for a socialist candidate. Yet those individuals, as we know from actual data, would agree with Bernie Sanders on his actual positions, remembering, of course, that there is a difference between Bernie Sanders' democratic socialism within a capitalist society and socialism writ large. 52% of Americans support a redistribution of wealth through heavily taxing the rich, for example. This is something that is at its highest level of support now since Gallup has been asking about that. 63% of Americans believe that the current distribution of wealth in the US is unfair. So I don't know, when I look at this data, if it's good news that we're up to 47% that would consider voting for a socialist, or if it's bad news because it's so low compared to every other group mentioned, in spite of the fact that there are probably way more Americans, definitely way more Americans, that would agree with so-called democratic socialist policies versus those who would agree with, for example, the teachings of Islam, which had a higher support level in terms of the candidates in this poll.
I think this has to be a good thing. What number would that 47% have been 20 years ago? So I think probably a good thing, a step in the right direction.
That indicator going up is not a bad thing. The problem is the disconnect between that number and an understanding of what the policies are that democratic socialism and people like Bernie Sanders would push. That's where I think the ignorance is a real problem.
Well, we're going to count on people not really understanding things like that. So that's going to happen no matter what. But if we have, words like this destigmatized, I think it's a good thing.